The clink of glasses and muffled conversations filled the dimly lit restaurant, but all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. My fingers trembled as I balanced the tray of drinks, weaving through the maze of tables at Bellissimo. 3 double shifts in a row had left dark circles under my eyes that even my carefully applied concealer couldn't hide. My feet ached in the mandatory black heels that Ms. Rossi insisted all waitresses wear, regardless of the pain they caused after 8 hours on the floor. "Table 7 needs their check, Emma," hissed Daniela as she brushed past me. Her perfect red lips curled into a smirk. She'd been working here half as long as I had, but somehow managed to secure all the high-tipping tables. I nodded silently, depositing the drinks at table 12 before making my way to the register. Bellissimo wasn't just any Italian restaurant in the city. It was the Italian restaurant, where reservations were made months in advance and where, rumor had it, certain businessmen conducted affairs that had nothing to do with the menu. Not that I cared. All that mattered were the tips that would help me make rent this month and maybe, if I was lucky, put a small dent in Mom's medical bills. The collection notices had started arriving with alarming frequency, each one bearing a larger sum than the last. The door swung open, letting in a gust of cold October air that raised goosebumps on my bare arms. I glanced up instinctively, a practiced smile forming on my lips that immediately froze when I saw who had entered. Even without the 2 broad-shouldered men flanking him, Luca Valenti would have commanded attention. He stood in the entrance, snowflakes melting in his dark hair, his tailored black coat emphasizing the width of his shoulders. At 32, he was younger than most men of his position. Not that anyone would call him anything other than Mr. Valenti to his face. Everyone knew who he was, though no one spoke of it directly. The owner of Bellissimo, Ms. Rossi, hustled over, her usually stern expression transformed into one of obsequious welcome. I watched as she led him to the private dining room at the back, the room reserved for special guests. I exhaled slowly, only then realizing I'd been holding my breath. The man's presence always seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. "Emma." Ms. Rossi was suddenly in front of me, her eyes gleaming with an intensity that made my stomach knot. "You'll be serving Mr. Valenti and his associates tonight." "What? But I've never—" The protest died on my lips as her fingers dug into my arm. Daniela called in sick. "You're the only one with enough experience." Her voice dropped to a harsh whisper. "Don't screw this up." My throat tightened as I nodded, forcing myself to breathe evenly. In the 2 years I'd worked at Bellissimo, I'd managed to avoid the private room. The stories I'd heard from other waitresses, of propositions, of wandering hands, of conversations that cut off abruptly when they entered, had been enough to keep me grateful for my tables in the main dining room. I smoothed down my black dress, checking my reflection in the polished surface of a serving tray. My dark blonde hair was still neatly pinned back, my makeup still intact despite the long shift. I looked presentable, if exhausted. The private dining room was separated from the main restaurant by a heavy oak door. I knocked softly before entering, my eyes downcast as I'd been instructed. "Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Emma, and I'll be your server tonight." I kept my voice steady, professional, despite the way my heart hammered against my ribs. 4 men sat around the large round table, but it was Luca Valenti who drew my gaze like a magnet. Up close, his presence was even more overwhelming. His eyes, a shade of amber so dark they appeared almost black in the low lighting, flicked briefly over me before returning to the man speaking across from him. "The Bordeaux 2010, he said, his voice a low, smooth rumble that sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. He hadn't bothered looking at the wine list I'd placed on the table. I nodded, turning to leave when another man at the table, older, with silver at his temples and a heavy gold watch glinting on his wrist, reached out and caught my hand. "What's the rush, Bella?" His fingers were cold against my skin, his grip just tight enough to be uncomfortable. "Why don't you join us for a moment?" I kept my eyes fixed on a point just past his shoulder, my pulse racing. "I need to get your wine, sir. Carlo." Valenti's voice was quiet but carried a note of warning that made the older man's smile falter. "Let her go." Carlo released my hand with obvious reluctance, and I retreated, careful not to move too quickly, not to show how badly I wanted to flee. The kitchen was a blessed chaos of steam and shouted orders, so different from the charged tension of the private room. I leaned against the cool wall for a moment, collecting myself. First time serving them, Marco, the bartender, appeared beside me with the wine I'd ordered. His face was sympathetic. "Just keep your head down and your ears closed, kid. That's how you survive a night with Valenti's crew." I nodded, taking the wine with hands that had finally stopped shaking. "Thanks." The evening progressed in a blur of courses and careful movements. I developed a rhythm. Enter silently, serve efficiently, leave promptly. The men largely ignored me after that initial interaction, deep in conversation that would abruptly halt whenever I approached. I became adept at announcing my presence with a subtle clearing of my throat, giving them time to pivot to casual topics. It was during the dessert course that everything changed. I was returning from the kitchen with a tray of espresso when I heard raised voices from inside the private room. I paused outside the door, hesitating. The voices grew louder, and I caught fragments of conversation that made my blood run cold. "Tomorrow night at the warehouse. Valenti won't see it coming. Russo's men are already in position." I stood frozen, the tray trembling slightly in my hands. I should walk away. Should pretend I'd heard nothing. That's what Marco would advise. That's what any sane person would do. Instead, I found myself pushing open the door with my hip, entering the room as if I hadn't just overheard a plan to betray the most dangerous man in the city. The conversation cut off instantly. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me, but I only registered Valenti's gaze, sharp, assessing, as if he could see right through me to the knowledge I now carried. I set down the espressos with mechanical precision, my movements on autopilot while my mind raced. One of these men, perhaps all of them except Valenti himself, was planning something for tomorrow night, something Valenti wouldn't see coming. As I placed the last cup in front of Carlo, he grabbed my wrist again, harder this time. "You look pale, Bella. Heard something interesting outside?" My mouth went dry. "No, sir. Just tired from a long shift." His fingers tightened painfully. "I don't believe you." "Carlo." Valenti's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Business is concluded for tonight." It wasn't a suggestion. Carlo released me, but his eyes promised retribution. I stepped back, bumping into Valenti, who had risen from his chair. The contact sent a jolt through me. He radiated heat like a furnace, the expensive fabric of his suit brushing against my arm. "I'll escort myself out," he said to the table at large, his tone pleasant, but his eyes cold. "Gentlemen?" The other men nodded, a current of something unspoken passing between them. Valenti turned to me, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he might say something about what I'd overheard. Instead, he simply placed several large bills on the table, far more than the meal had cost, and walked out. I finished clearing the table in a daze, hyper-aware of the 3 remaining men watching my every move. When I finally escaped to the kitchen, my hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the tray before I dropped it. "You okay?" Marco asked, eyeing me with concern. I nodded automatically. "Fine, just ready for my shift to end." The rest of the night passed in a blur. The 3 men left eventually, Carlo's gaze lingering on me with naked hostility as he departed. By the time I finished my side work, it was nearly midnight. The restaurant had emptied, with only Ms. Rossi counting the register, and Marco wiping down the bar. "Good job tonight, Emma," Ms. Rossi said, surprising me with the rare praise. Mr. Valenti left a generous tip. "You've earned your share." She handed me an envelope thick with cash. I should have felt elated. This would cover at least 2 of Mom's medical bills, but all I felt was numb. "Thank you," I murmured, tucking the envelope into my purse. "See you tomorrow." The night air was bitter cold as I stepped outside, pulling my thin jacket tighter around me. The street was deserted, pools of yellow lamplight illuminating patches of sidewalk between long stretches of shadow. My apartment was 15 blocks away, a walk I made every night, too broke to justify the bus fare when I had 2 working legs. I'd gone barely half a block when the sleek black car pulled up beside me. My heart leaped into my throat as the back window rolled down, revealing Luca Valenti's face, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Get in," he said, his voice leaving no room for refusal. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but where would I go? If half the stories about this man were true, There wasn't a place in the city where I could hide. With leaden limbs, I opened the car door and slid into the back seat beside him. The interior smelled of expensive leather, and his cologne, something subtle and woodsy that I'd caught hints of all evening. The driver, a stone-faced man with a neck like a bull, pulled smoothly away from the curb. "You heard something tonight." It wasn't a question. I stared at my hands, clasped tightly in my lap. Denial would be pointless. He'd seen the truth on my face the moment I entered that room with the espressos. "Yes," I whispered. "Tell me." I swallowed hard. They mentioned something about tomorrow night, at a warehouse. They said you wouldn't see it coming." I forced myself to look up, to meet his gaze directly. "I think they're planning to betray you." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark amber eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that I'd spoken so plainly. "Names," he demanded quietly. "They didn't use any. But it was after you left, the 3 who remained." I broke off, fear finally closing my throat. What was I doing? These men would kill me for what I was saying. As if reading my thoughts, Valenti leaned slightly closer. "No harm will come to you for telling me the truth, Emma." The sound of my name on his lips sent an involuntary shiver through me. I hadn't told him my name. He'd remembered it from my introduction hours earlier. "They mentioned someone named Russo," I continued, my voice barely audible. "That his men were already in position." Valenti's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He sat back, his gaze moving to the window, though I doubted he was seeing the streets we passed. "Where do you live?" he asked abruptly. I hesitated, then gave him my address in the rundown Eastern District. He nodded to his driver, who adjusted our course. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his eyes returning to my face. "You must know it's dangerous." The question caught me off guard. Why had I? Self-preservation alone should have kept me silent. "I don't know," I admitted. It just seemed wrong. What they were planning. I looked down at my hands again, and Carlo. The way he grabbed me, the way he looked at me. I think he would have hurt me either way. Valenti was silent for a long moment. "Yes," he finally said. "He would have." The car slowed in front of my apartment building, a crumbling brick structure that had seen better days decades ago. I reached for the door handle, desperate now to escape the confined space and the man who filled it with his dangerous presence. "Wait." His hand closed over my wrist, gentle but firm. Unlike Carlo's grip, his touch was warm, almost fevered. "This information, I'm in your debt." I shook my head quickly. "No, please. I don't want to be involved." A small, cold smile curved his lips. "Too late for that, I'm afraid." The driver exited the car and opened my door from the outside. I slid out, legs unsteady beneath me. "Your kindness won't be forgotten, Emma," Valenti said, just before the door closed between us. The car remained at the curb, engine idling, as I fumbled with the building's security door. Only when I was safely inside did it pull away, disappearing into the night like a sleek predator. I climbed the 4 flights to my tiny apartment, my mind replaying every moment of the evening. What had I done? And what would happen tomorrow night, now that I'd warned him? As I unlocked my door, a terrible certainty settled over me. This wasn't the end of my interaction with Luca Valenti. It was only the beginning. I barely slept that night. Every creak in the old building had me sitting bolt upright, convinced that Carlo or one of Valenti's other associates had discovered my betrayal. By the time my alarm blared at 6 a.m., my eyes were gritty with exhaustion, and a dull headache pulsed behind my temples. The morning light filtering through my thin curtains revealed my apartment in all its depressing glory. Water stains spreading across the ceiling, peeling wallpaper, and the second-hand furniture I'd scrounged from thrift stores. But it was mine, paid for with countless double shifts and skipped meals. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Mom's nursing home, again. I let it go to voicemail, not ready to hear another concerned update about her deteriorating condition, or another gentle reminder about the mounting bills. The guilt gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside, one problem at a time. I showered quickly in lukewarm water. The building's ancient boiler never managed anything hotter, and dressed for my shift at the diner where I worked mornings. Bellissimo might be where I made most of my money, but Gino's diner kept me afloat between dinner shifts. Outside, the city was waking up, exhaust fumes mingling with the smell of fresh bread from the bakery down the street. I pulled my jacket tighter against the chill, scanning the street nervously for black cars or watching eyes. Nothing seemed out of place, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. The morning passed in a blur of coffee refills and greasy breakfast orders. My mind kept drifting to what might be happening at that warehouse tonight, to what Valenti might be planning in response to my warning. Would there be violence? Deaths? And would those deaths be on my conscience? "Order up, Emma!" Gino's gruff voice snapped me back to reality. He pushed a plate of pancakes across the counter, eyeing me with concern. "You with us today? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "Just tired. Worked late at Bellissimo." Gino grunted sympathetically. He knew I was working 2 jobs, though I'd never told him why. "Don't burn yourself out, kid." By the time I left for my afternoon break before heading to Bellissimo, dark clouds had gathered overhead, threatening rain. I stopped at the nursing home, a detour I couldn't afford time-wise but couldn't avoid emotionally. The antiseptic smell hit me as soon as I walked in, making my stomach clench. Mom's room was at the end of the hall, a small space that cost more each month than my apartment. The early onset dementia had progressed faster than the doctors predicted. Some days she recognized me. Other days I was a stranger. Today was a bad day. "Who are you?" she asked, her once sharp eyes cloudy with confusion. "Are you the new nurse?" I swallowed the familiar pain. "It's Emma, Mom, your daughter." She frowned, studying me. "I don't have a daughter." I sat with her anyway, holding her hand and telling her about my day, omitting the parts involving mafia bosses and murder plots. By the time I left, the sky had opened up, rain sheeting down in icy torrents. I ran for the bus stop, arriving soaked and shivering. Bellissimo was unusually quiet when I arrived. I slipped in through the back entrance, heading straight for the employee lounge to change into my dry uniform. Daniela was there, applying a fresh coat of lipstick in the small mirror. "You're late," she said without looking at me. "Bus was delayed because of the rain." I peeled off my wet jacket, reaching for my locker. She snapped her compact shut. "Ms. Rossi wants to see you, in her office." My stomach dropped. Had someone connected me to whatever had happened with Valenti? Did she say why? Daniela shrugged, a hint of malicious curiosity in her eyes. No. But she didn't look happy. Ms. Rossi's office was a small room off the kitchen, meticulously organized and intimidatingly austere. She sat behind her desk, her expression inscrutable as I entered. "Emma, close the door." I obeyed, my pulse racing. "Is something wrong, Ms. Rossi? Mr. Valenti called this afternoon." She watched me carefully, noting my involuntary flinch at his name. "He requested you specifically as his server tonight." Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a new wave of dread. Me? But I thought, isn't Daniela handling the private room? Ms. Rossi's eyes narrowed. "Apparently Mr. Valenti was impressed with your service last night. This is an honor, Emma. One that could be very profitable for both you and the restaurant." Her tone made it clear that refusal wasn't an option. "He's reserved the room for 8 p.m. Just him, no other guests. Make sure you're prepared. Just him." The words echoed in my head as I left her office. What did that mean? Was this about my warning? Or something worse? The hours crawled by. I moved through my regular tables in the main dining room mechanically, spilling a glass of water at table 9 and forgetting a dessert order at table 4. By 7:30, my nerves were so frayed that Marco pulled me aside. "What's going on with you?" he asked, his voice low. "You look like you're about to jump out of your skin." I shook my head. "Nothing. Just not feeling well." He didn't believe me. I could tell by the way his eyes lingered on my face, but he didn't press. "Take a break. Get some air. You've got half an hour before the private room." The alley behind the restaurant was quiet. The rain having reduced to a fine mist, I leaned against the brick wall, closing my eyes and taking deep breaths of the damp, cool air. I could run, take the night's tips, get on a bus, go anywhere. But Mom, I couldn't leave her. And something told me that even if I ran, Luca Valenti would find me. At precisely 8 p.m., I knocked on the door of the private dining room, a bottle of the 2010 Bordeaux already in hand. There was a long pause before his voice called, "Enter." Valenti sat alone at the round table, as Ms. Rossi had said. He'd removed his suit jacket, the crisp white of his shirt a stark contrast to his tanned skin. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his fingers through it repeatedly. Despite the casual posture, there was nothing relaxed about the way he watched me approach. "Good evening, Mr. Valenti," I said, proud that my voice remained steady. "Would you like to see a menu?" "Sit down, Emma." Not a request. I hesitated, then slowly lowered myself into the chair across from him, setting the wine on the table between us. "Have you eaten?" he asked, the question so unexpected that I blinked in confusion. No, I haven't had time." He pushed a leather-bound menu toward me. "Order something for yourself, and open the wine." My hands trembled slightly as I uncorked the Bordeaux, pouring a measure into his glass, and then, at his gesture, into a second glass for myself. I set the menu aside without opening it. My appetite had vanished the moment I'd entered the room. "What happened?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. "With what I told you." His eyes met mine, unreadable and dark. "You're very direct for someone in your position. I can't eat or drink with you if I'm wondering if men are dying because of what I said," I replied, surprised by my own boldness. A hint of something, amusement perhaps, flickered across his features. "No one has died, yet." He took a sip of his wine. "Thanks to you." Relief washed through me, leaving me lightheaded. "So you stopped it?" "Whatever they were planning. I changed my plans," he corrected. "The meeting at the warehouse has been postponed." I nodded, taking a small sip of the wine to steady myself. It was richer than anything I'd ever tasted, complex flavors lingering on my tongue. "Why did you warn me?" Valenti asked, echoing his question from the night before. "The truth this time." I set down my glass carefully. "I told you the truth. What they were planning seemed wrong. You don't know me. You don't know what kind of man I am or what I've done." His voice remained conversational, but there was an edge to it now. "For all you know, I deserved whatever they had planned." I met his gaze, surprising myself again with my candor. "Maybe, but Carlo scared me more than you did." Valenti laughed, the sound low and unexpected. "A questionable character assessment, but I'll take it." He leaned forward slightly. "You've placed yourself in a difficult position, Emma. Carlo suspects you overheard something. He wanted to handle it his way." A chill ran through me at the implication. "And what's your way?" "I protect those who are loyal to me." His eyes held mine, intense and unblinking. "Last night, you chose a side. Whether you meant to or not, the realization of what he was saying sank in slowly. I'd become entangled in something much larger than a single overheard conversation. I'd become a liability to Carlo and the others, and an asset to Valenti. I didn't choose anything," I protested weakly. "I just reacted." Nevertheless, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small card, sliding it across the table to me. A phone number was embossed on its surface, nothing else. "If you notice anything unusual, anyone watching you, anyone approaching you, call this number, immediately." I stared at the card, not touching it. "Is that likely to happen?" "Carlo is not a man who forgives easily." "Until I resolve this situation, yes, it's a possibility." His tone was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than potential threats to my life. "And how long will that take?" "Resolving the situation?" I couldn't keep the tremor from my voice now. "Not long." The coldness that crept into his expression made me shiver. "In the meantime, I'll have someone watching your apartment. And I'd prefer if you limited your movements to work and home." Anger flared suddenly through my fear. "You can't just control my life like that. I have responsibilities. My mother—" "Your mother in the Meadowbrook nursing home," he interrupted. "Room 418, early onset dementia. 3 months behind on payments." The blood drained from my face. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know who I'm dealing with." He picked up his wine glass again, studying the deep red liquid. "Your mother's bills have been taken care of. For the next 6 months. I gaped at him, unable to process what he'd just said. Why would you do that? Considerate payment for the information you provided. His eyes met mine again. And incentive for your continued discretion. The implication was clear. My mother's care was now tied to my cooperation. It was both a generosity and a threat, wrapped in the same elegant package. I'm not for sale, I said quietly. Everyone has a price, Emma, he replied, not unkindly. Yours just happens to be more honorable than most. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Valenti straightened, his expression closing off. That will be my driver. I have business to attend to. I rose shakily from my chair, the untouched wine swimming in my glass. As I turned to leave, his hand caught my wrist, his touch sending an unwelcome jolt of electricity through me. The card, he reminded me, nodding to where it still lay on the table. I picked it up reluctantly, slipping it into my pocket. One more thing, he added, his voice dropping to a timbre that made my skin prickle. I'll be keeping a close eye on you, Emma. For your protection. His gaze lingered on my face for a moment longer than necessary, and I had the unsettling feeling that his interest might extend beyond gratitude for my warning or concern for a potential liability. Something possessive lurked behind those amber eyes, something that made my heart beat a rapid tattoo against my ribs. The next 2 days passed in a haze of anxiety and hypervigilance. I found myself scanning every face at the diner, every shadow on my walk home, every car that lingered too long at a curb. The weight of the card in my pocket felt like a stone, a constant reminder of the world I'd accidentally stepped into. True to Valenti's word, I occasionally glimpsed men I didn't recognize watching my apartment or following at a distance during my commute. They made no attempt to hide their presence. Perhaps that was the point. A visible deterrent against whatever threat Carlo might pose. On the third morning after my conversation with Valenti, I received a call from Meadowbrook. For once, it wasn't about overdue payments. Miss Turner, we wanted to let you know about some changes to your mother's care plan, the administrator said, her voice warm with an enthusiasm I'd never heard before. She's been moved to one of our premium suites, with a private nurse assigned specifically to her case. I sank onto the edge of my bed, stunned. There must be some mistake. I can't afford. Oh, it's all been arranged, she interrupted smoothly. A private benefactor has covered everything. Your mother's quite comfortable. She even has a view of the gardens now. A private benefactor. I closed my eyes, a confusing mix of gratitude and resentment washing over me. This was no mere payment for information. This was Valenti binding me to him with golden chains. Is there any way to decline this arrangement? I asked carefully. The administrator's voice cooled noticeably. I wouldn't recommend it, Miss Turner. Your mother has already been relocated, and she seems to be responding positively to the new environment. Disrupting her again could be detrimental to her condition. Of course, he'd made it impossible for me to refuse without hurting Mom. Clever. I thanked the administrator and hung up, staring at my phone. The card with Valenti's number seemed to burn in my pocket. I should call him, tell him to back off, that I didn't want his charity or his protection. But the memory of Carlo's cold eyes and cruel grip on my wrist held me back, and the thought of Mom, finally getting the care she deserved. I was still deliberating when my phone buzzed with a text from Ms. Rossi. No shift tonight. Restaurant closed for private event. Strange. Bellissimo never closed completely, even for private events. It was prime weekend business they'd be losing. Unless... The realization hit me with sickening clarity. Whatever Valenti had postponed at the warehouse was likely happening tonight, at Bellissimo. My warning had changed the location, not prevented the confrontation. My fingers hovered over the card in my pocket. I should stay out of it. I'd done more than enough already. Instead, I found myself at Bellissimo that evening, approaching from the alley that ran behind the kitchen. The restaurant's windows were dark, curtains drawn, but I could see the glow of light around the edges. The service entrance was unlocked, unusual and unsettling. The kitchen was deserted, pots and pans still hanging in their places, but cold and silent. No Marco preparing drinks, no line cooks shouting orders. The quiet raised the hair on my arms. I moved cautiously toward the swinging door that led to the dining room, driven by a curiosity I couldn't rationalize. Pushing it open a crack, I peered through. The main dining room had been cleared, tables pushed against walls. In the center stood Luca Valenti, surrounded by 4 men I recognized as his closest guards. Across from him were Carlo and the other 2 men from that first night, plus a 4th. Older, with silver hair, and the kind of face that might have been handsome once, before time and cruelty had carved deep lines into it. Russo, I realized. It had to be. They were talking, voices too low for me to hear from my position. Valenti's posture was relaxed, almost casual, but his men remained tense, hands never straying far from the weapons I knew they carried beneath their jackets. I should leave. Now. This was exactly the kind of situation Valenti had warned me to avoid. But as I began to back away, the kitchen door behind me creaked. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. Well, what do we have here? I turned slowly to find a man I didn't recognize blocking the exit, a thin smile playing on his lips. One of Russo's, based on the way he looked at me, like I was a pleasant surprise rather than an intruder. I was just leaving, I said, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. I forgot something from my locker. I don't think so, Bella. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging painfully into my flesh. Boss will want to know about this. He dragged me toward the dining room, ignoring my struggles. As we burst through the door, all conversation ceased. 8 pairs of eyes turned toward us, expressions ranging from surprise to calculated interest. Valenti's face betrayed nothing, but I caught the slight tightening of his jaw as he took in the scene. Found this one spying from the kitchen, my captor announced, shoving me forward. I stumbled, catching myself before I fell. The waitress. Russo's voice was smooth, cultured, at odds with the coldness in his eyes. How interesting. Carlo's gaze bored into me, his mouth twisting in a triumphant smirk. I told you she was trouble, Luca. Heard things she shouldn't have. Valenti stepped forward, positioning himself subtly between me and the others. She works here. Perhaps she simply came to collect something. On a night when the restaurant is closed? Russo raised a skeptical eyebrow. A night when you and I are finally meeting after so many misunderstandings? I found my voice, directing my words to Valenti. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I just needed to get something from my locker. The lie sounded weak even to my own ears. Search her, Russo ordered. One of his men moved forward, but Valenti's hand shot out, gripping the man's wrist with such force that he winced. No one touches her. The words were soft, but carried undeniable menace. Russo's eyes narrowed, darting between Valenti and me with new interest. The girl means something to you. It wasn't a question. The girl works for me, Valenti replied evenly, and I protect what's mine. The possessive declaration sent a shiver down my spine, equal parts fear and something else I didn't want to examine. How touching, Russo mocked. Luca Valenti, defender of waitresses. He turned to Carlo. You said she overheard your conversation the other night? About our original plans? Carlo nodded, his eyes never leaving my face, and I bet she ran straight to Valenti with it. Why else would he have changed the meeting place? Russo sighed dramatically. So she's the reason we're having this delightful chat in a restaurant, rather than concluding our business more efficiently at the warehouse. He reached inside his jacket, producing a sleek black pistol. A problem easily solved. Everything happened at once. Russo raised the gun toward me. Valenti lunged forward, shoving me roughly behind him. The sound of more weapons being drawn filled the air as both sides prepared for violence. You touch her, and this city burns, Valenti said, his voice deadly quiet. Starting with you, Russo. The older man hesitated, surprised by the intensity of Valenti's reaction. Then he laughed, a cold sound devoid of humor. Over a waitress? You disappoint me, Luca. I thought you were smarter than that. This isn't about her, Valenti countered smoothly. This is about respect. You come into my territory, plan to ambush me, and now threaten someone under my protection? He shook his head slightly. Bad business, Russo. Tension crackled in the air between the 2 men. I stood frozen behind Valenti, acutely aware that my life hung in the balance of this power struggle. Perhaps, Russo conceded finally, lowering his gun slightly, but we still have the matter of your encroachment on my shipping routes to discuss. And now it seems the complication of your... Waitress. Emma goes home, unharmed, Valenti stated. That's non-negotiable. Russo studied him for a long moment. Very well. Marco, escort the lady out. A man detached himself from Russo's group. Not my Marco from the bar, but a stone-faced enforcer with cold eyes. No. Valenti's refusal was immediate. My driver will take her. For a tense moment, I thought Russo would refuse, then he shrugged. As you wish. Carlo, call down Valenti's man. As Carlo moved toward the front of the restaurant, Valenti turned slightly, his eyes meeting mine for the first time since I'd been discovered. Wait in the car, he said quietly. Go straight home. Lock your doors. I'll call you later. I nodded mutely, still processing the fact that he'd just placed himself between me and a bullet. His driver appeared at the door, his expression grim as he took in the standoff. Valenti jerked his head toward me, and the driver nodded, extending his hand. Miss Turner, this way, please. I moved toward him, careful to give Russo and his men a wide berth. As I passed Carlo, he leaned in, whispering so only I could hear. This isn't over, Bella. Not for you. I quickened my pace, not stopping until I reached the safety of Valenti's car. The driver said nothing as he pulled away from Bellissimo, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors for followers. Are they going to kill him? I asked, unable to stop myself. The driver's eyes flickered to mine in the rearview mirror. Mr. Valenti can handle himself. That's not what I asked. His mouth tightened. It's better if you don't ask questions, Miss Turner. We rode in silence after that. When we reached my apartment, he insisted on escorting me inside, checking each room before leaving me with a terse instruction to keep the doors and windows locked. I sat on my worn sofa in the darkened apartment, shaking with delayed shock. Valenti had protected me, placed himself between me and danger without hesitation. And for what? Information I'd already given him? A sense of ownership over someone he barely knew? The call came at 3 a.m, waking me from a fitful sleep on the couch. I fumbled for my phone, heart racing when I saw the unlisted number. Hello? My voice was thick with sleep and anxiety. Did I wake you? Valenti. Alive. No. I lied, sitting up straight. What happened? Are you okay? A pause, then a low chuckle. Concerned for my welfare, Emma? You put yourself between me and a gun, I said quietly, so yes, I'm concerned. Another pause, longer this time. Russo and I came to an understanding. The immediate situation has been resolved. Relief washed over me, though I wasn't entirely sure why. This man was dangerous, possibly a killer, and yet I'd been worried about him. And Carlo? Carlo will not be troubling you again. His tone left no doubt about what that meant. I closed my eyes, queasy at the implication. I see. No, you don't, Valenti said, his voice gentler now. But that's for the best. He cleared his throat. I'm leaving town for a few days. Business matters require my attention elsewhere. Oh. I wasn't sure how to respond. All right. You'll be safe while I'm gone. My men will keep watch on your apartment and the nursing home. And Emma... He paused. No more visits to Bellissimo until I return. Ms. Rossi has been informed you're taking a paid leave. Irritation flared through my exhaustion. You can't just arrange my life like that. I need the income... Check your account in the morning, he interrupted. The leave is fully compensated. I bit back a sharp retort. What was the point? He'd already shown he would do as he pleased, rearranging the pieces of my life like chessmen on a board. Fine, I said finally. Thank you for... tonight. For protecting me. You're mine to protect now, Emma, he replied, his voice dropping to that low timbre that made my skin prickle. Get some rest. I'll be in touch. The line went dead before I could respond to his possessive declaration. I stared at the phone, wondering how my life had changed so dramatically in just a few days. From anonymous waitress to... what? The protected property of Luca Valenti. The days of Valenti's absence stretched into a week, then nearly 2. True to his word, My bank account had been credited with more money than I would have made in a month at both jobs combined. The nursing home called twice more to update me on Mom's improved condition. She was responding well to the new medication that had previously been too expensive to consider. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt like a bird in a gilded cage, comfortable but confined. Valenti's men maintained their silent vigil outside my building, following at a discreet distance whenever I ventured out for groceries or to visit Mom. They never spoke to me, never interfered, but their constant presence was a reminder that I was being watched. Protected, yes, but also monitored. By the 10th day, restlessness drove me to break Valenti's rules. I called Gino's diner and asked if I could pick up a shift. About time, Gino exclaimed. I was starting to think you'd found a better job. Come in tomorrow morning, usual time. The familiar rhythm of the diner was comforting. Pouring coffee, taking orders, the sizzle of bacon on the grill. For a few hours, I could almost pretend that my life hadn't been upended, that I wasn't caught in the orbit of a man who killed people who crossed him. I was refilling a customer's coffee when the bell above the door jangled. I glanced up automatically, the coffee pot nearly slipping from my fingers when I saw who had entered. Luca Valenti stood in the doorway of the greasy spoon diner, looking as out of place as a wolf in a henhouse. He wore no suit today, just dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But there was no disguising who and what he was. Power and danger radiated from him like heat. The diner fell silent as he surveyed the room, his amber eyes finding mine immediately. Without acknowledging the stares, he moved to an empty booth in my section and sat down. Gino appeared at my elbow, his expression torn between curiosity and concern. You know him? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Trouble? No, I managed. I'll handle it. My legs felt unsteady as I approached Valenti's booth. He watched my approach with those predator's eyes, taking in the cheap polyester uniform and the coffee stains on my apron. I thought I was clear about taking leave, he said by way of greeting. I set a mug in front of him and poured coffee with a hand that only trembled slightly. From Bellissimo. You said nothing about Gino's. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. A technicality. Why are you here? I kept my voice low, aware of the interested eyes watching our interaction. I returned to the city this morning. He took a sip of coffee, grimacing slightly at the bitter taste. Imagine my surprise when I learned you'd gone back to work against my explicit instructions. They weren't instructions. They were requests. The words came out braver than I felt. This time his smile was real, if fleeting. Is that what you tell yourself? I folded my arms across my chest. I'm not one of your employees, Mr. Valenti. You don't get to dictate how I live my life. And yet, he replied, his voice dangerously soft, here I am, doing exactly that. We stared at each other, locked in a silent battle of wills. It was madness to challenge him. I knew what he was capable of, had seen the cold calculation in his eyes when he'd faced down Russo. Yet something in me couldn't submit to this complete takeover of my existence. What do you want from me? I finally asked, the question that had been burning inside me for days. Valenti leaned back, studying me with unnerving intensity. Finish your shift. We'll talk after. It wasn't an answer, but I recognized the dismissal. I turned away, only to feel his fingers close gently around my wrist, stopping me. Emma. He rarely said my name, and each time it sent an unwelcome current through me. Don't make me wait too long. I pulled my arm free and retreated to the safety of the counter, my heart hammering in my chest. Gino shot me a concerned look, but said nothing as I grabbed the next order. For the next hour, I moved through the diner like a sleepwalker, hyper-aware of Valenti's presence in the corner booth. He nursed his coffee, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly watching me. What did he see when he looked at me? A useful pawn? A responsibility? Something else entirely? When my shift finally ended, he was waiting outside, leaning against a sleek black car. Different from the one I'd ridden in before, but no less imposing. His driver stood at attention nearby, scanning the street with practiced vigilance. Get in, Valenti said, opening the passenger door. This time I didn't hesitate. Whatever was happening between us needed resolution, and I wouldn't find it by running. The interior of the car smelled of new leather and his now familiar cologne. Valenti slid in beside me, closer than necessary in the spacious back seat. The driver took his place silently and pulled away from the curb. "You've been busy while I was gone," Valenti remarked, his eyes on my profile. "Not really. Your men hardly let me out of their sight, for your protection." "Is that what it is?" I turned to face him. "Or is it to make sure I don't run?" His expression remained impassive. "Would you? Run?" I looked away, out the tinted window at the passing city. "Where would I go? My mother is here, and you'd find me anyway." "Yes," he agreed simply. "I would." The car turned onto a tree-lined street in the exclusive north side of the city, far from my rundown neighborhood. Elegant townhouses gave way to even more elegant mansions set back from the road behind wrought iron gates. "Where are we going?" I asked, a flutter of anxiety rising in my chest. "My home." He said it casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to bring me to his private residence. The car slowed before an imposing limestone mansion with meticulously manicured grounds. The gate swung open automatically, and we proceeded up a curved driveway to the front entrance. Unlike the other homes we'd passed, there were no ostentatious fountains or statues, just clean lines and understated elegance. "Why?" I asked as the car stopped. Valenti's eyes met mine. "Because what I have to say to you requires privacy." The driver opened my door, and I stepped out, momentarily disoriented by the sudden shift from my world to this one. Valenti's hand settled lightly at the small of my back, guiding me up the steps to the massive front door, which opened before we reached it. A slender woman in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, greeted us with a warm smile that transformed her stern features. "Welcome home, Mr. Valenti." "Thank you, Mrs. Abelli. This is Emma Turner. She'll be joining me for lunch." The housekeeper's gaze swept over me, taking in my diner uniform and messy ponytail without a hint of judgment. "Of course. I'll serve in the solarium in 20 minutes. "Emma might wish to freshen up first," Valenti suggested. Mrs. Abelli nodded. "I'll show her to the guest suite." I followed the housekeeper up a sweeping staircase, through corridors adorned with understated but clearly valuable artwork, to a suite that was larger than my entire apartment. Soft cream walls, a king-sized bed with crisp linens, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking an expansive garden. "The bathroom is through there," Mrs. Abelli said, indicating a door to the left. "You'll find everything you need, Mr. Valenti will be waiting in the solarium when you're ready." Down the main staircase, first door on the right. Before I could form a response, she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. I stood frozen in the middle of the luxurious room, overwhelmed by the surreality of the situation. I should be terrified. I should be planning my escape. Instead, I found myself drawn to the bathroom, where I washed the smell of diner grease from my hands and face and attempted to smooth my hair into something more presentable. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror looked like a stranger. Familiar features arranged in an expression of wary curiosity rather than fear. What was happening to me? With no alternative clothing available, I straightened my uniform as best I could and made my way downstairs. The solarium was easy to find, a bright, airy space with glass walls that brought the garden inside. Valenti stood with his back to me, looking out at a rose garden in full bloom. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he asked without turning. "My mother planted those roses. They're the only thing I've kept exactly as she left them." The unexpected glimpse into his personal history caught me off guard. "They're lovely." He turned then, gesturing to a table set for two by the window. "Please sit." I took a seat, watching as he poured white wine into delicate crystal glasses. This domestic side of Luca Valenti was disconcerting. The dangerous man I'd glimpsed at Bellissimo seemed at odds with this cultured host serving wine in a sun-filled room surrounded by roses. "You're wondering why I brought you here," he said, taking the seat across from me. Among other things, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Such as what happens now. You've paid my mother's care for 6 months. You've compensated me for work I haven't done. You've had me followed, protected. I met his gaze steadily. "What do you expect in return?" Mrs. Abelli entered with a tray of antipasti before he could answer, setting it between us with practiced efficiency before withdrawing again. Valenti selected a slice of prosciutto, considering his words carefully. When I first had you brought to my car that night, I intended only to verify what you'd overheard and ensure your silence. And now? I prompted when he paused, his amber eyes locked with mine. Now I find myself invested in your well-being because I warned you about Russo's trap? Initially, yes. He sipped his wine. But it's become more than that. My heart beat faster at the implications of his words. I'm not for sale, Mr. Valenti. I told you that before. Luca, he corrected gently. And I'm not trying to buy you, Emma. I'm trying to protect you. From what? The danger I'm in only exists because of my connection to you. A shadow crossed his features. Not entirely true. Carlo had marked you as a target long before you warned me. He has a history with waitresses that doesn't end well. I shivered, remembering Carlo's cold eyes and cruel grip. So what now? You keep me as a permanently protected witness. I can't live like this forever, jumping at shadows, followed everywhere I go. No, he agreed, you can't. Mrs. Abelli returned with our main course, a delicate pasta with seafood that would have made my mouth water under normal circumstances. As it was, my appetite had vanished beneath the weight of anxiety. I have a proposition for you, Valenti Luca, said after the housekeeper had gone. I'm listening. He set down his fork, giving me his full attention. Come work for me, officially. I stared at him. Doing what exactly? I own several legitimate businesses that could use someone with your observational skills. His expression remained serious. You notice things others don't. You're intelligent, discreet when necessary, and not easily intimidated. All valuable qualities. You want me to spy for you, I translated flatly. I want to offer you a position with better pay, better hours, and better prospects than waiting tables. He leaned forward slightly. And yes, occasional insights about the people I do business with would be appreciated. I pushed my plate away, appetite completely gone now. And if I refuse? Then you return to your life, with my protection continuing as long as necessary. His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. Your mother's care remains secured either way. That was never conditional. The offer hung between us, tempting in its simplicity, a way out of the endless struggle to make ends meet, to provide for Mom, to build some kind of future. All it would cost was my independence, and possibly my conscience. I need time to think, I said finally. Luca nodded, as if he'd expected this answer. Of course. We finished the meal in relative silence, the tension between us shifting into something less adversarial, but no less intense. As Mrs. Abelli cleared away the dishes, Luca's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, a slight frown creasing his brow. Is something wrong? I asked, surprising myself with my concern. Nothing urgent, he replied, returning the phone to his pocket. My driver will take you home now. Take the weekend to consider my offer. As we rose from the table, he stepped closer than strictly necessary, his proximity sending that now familiar current through my veins. Up close, I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. Whatever you decide, he said softly, know that I will keep you safe, Emma. Whether you're mine or not. The possessive claim sent a shiver down my spine, not entirely from fear. Before I could respond, he brushed his fingers lightly against my cheek, a touch so brief I might have imagined it. My driver is waiting, he said, stepping back. I'll call you on Monday. The ride back to my apartment passed in a blur, my mind racing with the implications of Luca's offer and the undercurrent of something else that had passed between us. By the time the car stopped in front of my building, I'd made my decision. Block 5. Monday arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I'd spent the weekend weighing my options, visiting Mom, who recognized me this time and seemed genuinely happier in her new surroundings, and coming to terms with how dramatically my life had changed since that fateful night at Bellissimo. The call came precisely at noon, as if Luca had been watching the clock. Have you made your decision? He asked without preamble. Yes, I replied, equally direct. I'll accept your offer, but I have conditions. A pause, then a low chuckle. I should have expected nothing less. Name them. First, I want to know exactly what I'll be doing. No vague descriptions of observational skills. I need specifics. Fair enough. I own several high-end restaurants, a wine import business, and a real estate development company. You would start as my personal assistant, accompanying me to meetings and events. Your official role would be managing my schedule and correspondence, but your actual value would be in watching, listening, and reporting back your impressions of the people we deal with. I absorbed this, picturing myself in sleek offices and exclusive restaurants rather than serving in them. Second condition, I want my mother's care guaranteed regardless of how long I work for you. If it doesn't work out, if I leave, she stays where she is with the same level of care. Done, he said without hesitation. I've already arranged a trust for her care that extends well beyond 6 months. It's not conditional on your employment. The ready agreement surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Money clearly wasn't an object for him. Third, I continued, I want to maintain some independence. My own apartment, my own life outside of work hours. This time the pause was longer. I can agree to that, with caveats. Your current apartment isn't secure enough. I'll arrange for something safer in a better neighborhood. As for independence after hours, within reason, your safety remains my priority. It wasn't everything I wanted, but it was more than I'd expected him to concede. Last condition, I won't do anything illegal. I won't be involved in whatever other businesses you run. You'll be employed by Valenti Enterprises, which is entirely legitimate, he responded smoothly. What I do outside of that need not concern you. A convenient fiction, but one I could live with. Then we have a deal. Excellent. The satisfaction in his voice sent a small shiver down my spine. A car will pick you up tomorrow morning at 9. Pack whatever you wish to take with you to your new apartment. The rest can be moved later or replaced. Tomorrow? I hadn't expected things to move so quickly. Is that a problem? I glanced around my shabby apartment, at the water stains on the ceiling and the second-hand furniture. What was there to wait for? No. Tomorrow is fine. Good. Oh, and Emma? His voice dropped to that lower register that never failed to raise goosebumps on my arms. I'm pleased with your decision. The line went dead before I could respond. I stood in the middle of my apartment, phone in hand, wondering if I'd just made the best decision of my life, or the worst mistake. The next morning dawned bright and crisp, autumn sunlight filtering through my thin curtains as I packed the few possessions worth taking. Clothes that had seemed adequate for a waitress now looked shabby when I considered my new role. Books, some photos of Mom from before her illness, the small jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother. These filled a single suitcase and 2 boxes. At precisely 9, my phone buzzed with a text, car waiting downstairs. I took one last look around the apartment that had been my home for 3 years. Despite its flaws, it had been mine. Paid for with my own hard work, no strings attached. The first place that had truly been my own after leaving home. I felt a pang of something like grief as I locked the door behind me. The car waiting at the curb wasn't the sleek black sedan I'd expected, but an elegant silver Mercedes with tinted windows. The driver, different from the one I'd met previously, opened the door for me with a respectful nod. Good morning, Miss Turner. Mr. Valenti sends his apologies that he couldn't come himself. He's tied up in meetings this morning, but will meet you at the new apartment later today. I settled into the plush leather seat, my small suitcase and boxes looking particularly pathetic in such luxurious surroundings. Where exactly are we going? Lakeside Towers, miss. The north building. My breath caught. Lakeside Towers was one of the most exclusive addresses in the city, a pair of gleaming glass and steel buildings overlooking the lake, with penthouses rumored to sell for 8 figures. Even the smallest units there would cost more than I'd make in a decade of waiting tables. The drive took us away from my familiar neighborhood, through downtown and into the pristine lakefront district. Immaculate streets lined with high-end boutiques and restaurants gave way to the soaring towers, which gleamed in the morning sun like beacons of wealth and privilege. The driver pulled into a private underground garage, where a uniformed doorman waited beside a private elevator. He greeted me by name, as if I were expected, which of course I was. Welcome to Lakeside Towers, Miss Turner. Mr. Valenti has arranged everything for your arrival. I'll show you to your apartment. The elevator required a key card, which the doorman provided. This is yours, he explained, handing me the slim piece of plastic. It gives you access to your floor, the garage, and the building amenities. The doors opened directly into a foyer, beyond which lay an apartment that momentarily stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of the lake, its blue waters stretching to the horizon. The space was open and airy, with hardwood floors, sleek modern furniture, and art that, even to my untrained eye, looked original and expensive. "Mr. Valenti hoped you would find it suitable," the doorman said, noting my stunned expression. "The kitchen is fully stocked, and there's a welcome package on the counter with information about the building services. Will you need help with your bags?" I shook my head mutely, still trying to process the reality of the apartment. My apartment, apparently. "Very well. If you need anything, the concierge desk is staffed 24 hours. Just dial 0 on any house phone." With a polite nod, he returned to the elevator, leaving me alone in the vast, elegant space. I set down my pathetic boxes and wandered through the apartment, trailing my fingers over surfaces that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined. The living room opened onto a dining area and a kitchen with gleaming appliances and stone countertops. A hallway led to a master bedroom with a bed large enough to get lost in, a bathroom with a shower and separate soaking tub, and a second bedroom set up as an office. The closet in the master bedroom stopped me short. It was filled with clothes, women's clothes in exactly my size. Dresses, suits, casual wear, all with designer labels I recognized but had never imagined owning. Shoes lined one wall, handbags another. On the dresser sat a handwritten note. A starting point. "We'll shop for more once you're settled. L." I sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the gesture that was both incredibly generous and disturbingly presumptuous. He'd anticipated my needs, yes, but also taken the liberty of choosing for me, of deciding what I should wear in my new role as his personal assistant. The golden cage was growing more elaborate by the minute. I was still processing when a discreet chime announced someone at the door. Expecting the doorman again, I was startled to find Luca himself standing in the hallway, casually elegant in a light gray suit with no tie. "You're early," I said, momentarily forgetting the polite greeting I'd rehearsed. His mouth curved in a hint of a smile. I rearranged my schedule. His eyes moved past me, taking in the boxes I'd left in the foyer. "Is that all you brought?" I felt a flush of embarrassment at the meager evidence of my former life. "I travel light." "So I see." He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence immediately filling the space in a way that had nothing to do with his physical size. "Do you like the apartment?" "It's overwhelming," I admitted, "far more than I need." "It's secure," he countered. "And convenient to the office. The previous tenant was one of my executives who relocated last month." I followed him into the living room, watching as he moved to the windows, looking out over the lake with the air of a man surveying his domain. Which, for all I knew, he might be. "I found the clothes," I said, unable to keep a hint of challenge from my voice. "A bit presumptuous, don't you think?" He turned, one eyebrow raised. "Practical. You start tomorrow. I assumed you'd want to look the part." "And what part is that exactly? Arm candy? Trophy assistant?" Something dangerous flickered in his amber eyes. "Is that what you think I want from you?" I crossed my arms, standing my ground despite the nervous flutter in my stomach. "I don't know what you want from me. That's the problem." Luca moved closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "I told you what I want. Your observational skills, your intelligence, your unique perspective." His voice dropped slightly. "Anything else that develops between us will be separate from our professional arrangement." The implication hung in the air between us, charging the atmosphere with a tension that had nothing to do with fear. I took a deliberate step back. "There is no between us," I said, trying to sound more convinced than I felt. "You're my employer. That's all." Something like amusement crossed his features. "For now." Before I could form a retort, he moved toward the kitchen, effectively changing the subject. "You'll need to be ready at 7 tomorrow. We have breakfast with the zoning commissioner and then meetings at the office until lunch. After that, we'll visit the site for the new restaurant." I followed, grateful for the shift to business. "Should I be taking notes? Marina will email you the full schedule. She's been my assistant until now. She'll help with your transition for the first few weeks." He leaned against the counter, studying me with that intense gaze that seemed to see too much. "You look tired. Did you sleep last night?" The unexpected concern caught me off guard. "Not much," I admitted. "It's been a lot to process." He nodded, as if this was the answer he'd expected. "Take today to settle in. Rest. There's a car at your disposal in the garage. The doorman has the keys, but the building has everything you might need. Restaurant, spa, gym." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate for what he'd provided but necessary nonetheless. Luca straightened, checking his watch. "I have another meeting. I'll leave you to get comfortable." He moved toward the door but paused in the foyer. "One more thing." I raised an eyebrow in question. "Dinner tonight, here, to discuss the details of your role more thoroughly." It wasn't quite a question, nor entirely a command. "I'll have something sent up at 7. "All right," I agreed, too mentally exhausted to argue about yet another presumption. He nodded, apparently satisfied, then left without another word, the door closing softly behind him. I stood in the silent apartment, surrounded by luxury that didn't feel like mine, caught in the gravity of a man whose true intentions I still couldn't decipher. What had I gotten myself into? The day passed in a haze of unpacking, exploring, and trying to acclimate to my new reality. I showered in the enormous bathroom, the hot water and expensive toiletries washing away some of my anxiety. I tried on some of the new clothes, surprised to find that they not only fit perfectly, but suited me in a way my old wardrobe never had. I ventured down to the building's restaurant for lunch, using the keycard that apparently also functioned as a charge card. The bill never came. By the time evening arrived, I felt more settled, if not entirely at ease. I chose a simple black dress from the closet, elegant, but not overtly sexy, and minimal jewelry. Whatever Luca's game was, I intended to maintain clear boundaries. At precisely 7, dinner arrived, delivered by a private chef who set up an elaborate meal on the dining table, complete with wine pairings and candles, before discreetly departing. Minutes later, Luca arrived, having changed into a dark suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders and the lean strength of his frame. "You look lovely," he said, his eyes taking in the dress with appreciation that remained just on the professional side of appropriate. "Thank you." I gestured to the elaborate table setting. "This seems a bit much for a business dinner." A smile played at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps, but your first day deserves some celebration." He pulled out a chair for me. "Shall we?" The meal was exquisite, the conversation surprisingly easy. Luca outlined my responsibilities in more detail, managing his schedule, coordinating between his various businesses, attending meetings and events as his representative when necessary. The salary he mentioned was more than triple what I'd made at both my previous jobs combined. "And the other part?" I asked as we finished the main course. "The observational role?" Luca swirled the wine in his glass thoughtfully. "You'll meet many people in this position. Business associates, competitors, officials. I want your honest impressions. Who seems trustworthy? Who doesn't? What motivations might lie beneath the surface?" His eyes met mine. "You have good instincts, Emma. You sensed Carlo's nature immediately. That's valuable to me. And if my instincts tell me someone you trust is dangerous, or someone you're suspicious of is honest, then I expect you to tell me exactly that." He replied without hesitation. "Your value is in your unfiltered perspective, not in saying what you think I want to hear." I nodded slowly, a small knot of tension easing in my chest. Whatever else Luca Valenti might be, he didn't seem to want a yes woman. As the chef's assistant cleared away the dessert plates, Luca rose and moved to the windows, looking out at the lake now silvered by moonlight. "Come here," he said softly. "There's something I want to show you." I joined him, maintaining a careful distance. He pointed to a building across the water, its lights gleaming in the darkness. "That's where I grew up," he said, surprising me. Not in that exact building, it wasn't there then, but that neighborhood. My father was a dock worker. My mother cleaned houses for the wealthy, including this very building. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this information with the powerful, wealthy man beside me. "How did you get here?" His smile held no humor. "Hard work, sacrifice, and choices most people would never make." He turned to face me fully, I tell you this so you understand something important, Emma. I know what it's like to feel trapped by circumstance, to work yourself to exhaustion just to stay afloat, to watch someone you love suffer because you can't afford to help them. The unexpected vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that despite what you may think, I do understand what I've asked of you. The position you're in. His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering, and I want you to know that while I expect your loyalty and discretion, I don't take them for granted. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not erasing the power imbalance, but acknowledging it, making it somehow more honest. Thank you for that, I said quietly. He nodded once, then stepped back, breaking the moment. It's getting late, and you have an early start tomorrow. I should go. I walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him leave despite my earlier reservations. He paused in the doorway, his expression softening slightly. Good night, Emma. Good night, Luca. It was the first time I'd used his first name, and the way his eyes darkened in response sent a flutter through my stomach that had nothing to do with fear. As the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, closing my eyes. In the space of 2 weeks, my life had transformed completely. I'd gone from struggling waitress to the personal assistant of one of the city's most powerful men. I'd moved from a crumbling apartment to a luxury high-rise. I'd secured my mother's care and my own financial future, and I'd bound myself to Luca Valenti in ways I still didn't fully understand. Whatever came next, whatever developed between us, as he'd put it, one thing was certain. There was no going back to the life I'd known before. For better or worse, my fate was now intertwined with his. As I moved through the elegant apartment that was now my home, I found myself wondering not if, but when, the line between professional and personal would blur.